Hello, my fellow chatterers and book devourers, and anyone else who's popped in because you're curious or you're lost. I'm Chatty. Welcome to my channel, Chatty the Mad Chatter. I'm chatting away madly about The Long Way Down, novel in verse, and the graphic novel. So I picked up both of these from the library, and I read this in May. Absolutely loved it. It's one of my favourite books of the year so far, and I couldn't wait to sit down and read the graphic novel, and then I really want to do a video where I can kind of compare the two. And I did it at the last minute. I have renewed these 4 times and I literally need to go back to the library tomorrow. So I was like, oh my gosh, I need to read this. So here we go. We've read them, we're reviewing, and we're going to crack on with it. As always, it's a one-shot review because I don't edit my videos because my laptop is decrepit, and I'm actually kind of enjoying not editing them, as crazy as it is. So cheers everyone. Let's hope I don't get too crazy. So I found the graphic novel absolutely as powerful as the novel in verse. Obviously the format's very different, so you kind of get different things from the story. And I found that obviously the artwork was going to play a big part. That's obvious when you have a graphic novel, and it absolutely did. And also kind of the word placement and kind of the font that's used also kind of added a lot to the story as well. And within the artwork, you have kind of lots of flashback kind of past moments. In the novel in verse, you have Will telling the story. So we're kind of half in the present as he's telling his story, and then he kind of refers to things in the past, and anything that's in the past in here is done in kind of a blue and white, see if I can, there we go, in kind of like blue and white grayscale to show that it's kind of set in the past. And there's some lovely kind of contrast moments here. Here we go. So we have like this moment with his Pop where he's kind of thinking about him in the present, and then we have Pop in the past, and I love that they are just mirroring that same pose as he then starts to tell his story. So I loved all of that. I really enjoyed kind of exploring the changes that happened as the book changed format. So if you are unaware, The Long Way Down is, I haven't even said who wrote it, which is appalling. The Long Way Down is a contemporary novel. This is the novel in verse, and it is written by Jason Reynolds. And in the novel in verse, the illustrations are done by Chris Priestley. In the graphic novel, obviously again, text has been supplied by Jason Reynolds. I'd be interested to know how much input he had in the layout of the pictures and kind of the design side of it. It doesn't really say, you never kind of get, it doesn't really say like how much input that that was had. Oh, okay, yeah, no, it was designed by Dancia Novgorodov and Sonia Chahadsabian. Apologies if I am absolutely slaughtering those names. So yes, the artwork was done by Dancia Novgorodov, and they were the planner of where it was placed and things. So that's really interesting. So yes, this is a story of Will, whose brother is killed, and he gets in the lift wanting to take revenge on the killer, following the rules within his community, and then things get strange. And his journey, at each stop on his journey down, he meets a different person, and then it's kind of their kind of conversation about what's happening, that we kind of get to listen to and kind of learn more about what life is like for Will and what life has been like in the past for this community. And it's just so powerful. It is such a powerful book, and I found them both equally as powerful. But I was really fascinated to kind of, so I'd read this one in May, then I read this one, just read the whole thing straight through, And then I kind of read them both side by side, kind of comparing how they told the story in different ways, and if there was one side that I preferred more than the other. So one thing that struck me was in the novel in verse, it's not such a linear storytelling. We kind of get the introduction, we're given the kind of the main point of the story straight away, the fact that Sean is dead and that this has devastated Will. It's his only brother, he's his older brother, and it's just kind of broken him, and all he has left to cling on to are the rules that have been passed down, which is one of which is, if someone you love has been killed, you go and kill the killer. That's very much kind of an eye for eye philosophy. So after he's kind of explained that and the grief and the hurt, he then talks about how it happened. In the graphic novel, you have the beginning, the introduction is similar, but then it's straight into, the story starts off that Sean, it kind of goes immediately to the point of Sean being alive, and it goes straight into kind of the what happened, and then his kind of, we get the devastation reaction of Will. I don't know why I've held this book up, although this is Will. I think that's because that's a picture of him, but he's also on here. Anyway, tangents. You have it playing out in present time. It's sort of like it's played out more in real time. It's more of a linear storyline. So Sean is killed, we get Will's grief, and then we kind of get the plan. So it's slightly different. So some bits of the words and text that came in here sort of at the beginning and then kind of put later on into this book, and I just found that kind of that comparison quite interesting. So we have so one of the moments that I really wanted to share that I found really powerful was the moment of Sean's death. So one moment you have everyone kind of playing around sort of like by the basketball courts, and then I love how did I even show you that picture? I feel like I've just flicked to it. I don't know if you actually saw it, but there we go, like playing around, normal life happening, and then you immediately have bam, they hear the gun. And I love how it's drawn in this kind of like red blood paint is the writing for here. And so you get it, so you kind of get this moment of them playing the basketball, then immediately you have this wonderful picture of like Will just kind of like freezing. He hears the gunshot, and his friend Tony, who's literally just been making a slam dunk, is like in mid shot, and then immediately there you get everyone kind of reacting to what they do when this happens, which is heads down on the ground on the floor, really hope that no one gets hit, that everyone's going to get up again once this has gone past. And then I love how it's kind of portrayed in here. So you have where it talks about what they do when the bullet's coming, and then you have this image here of the bullet and the bullet getting bigger, them talking about what they always do, they get down on the ground, and then I just absolutely love this moment of realization. And we have before picking our heads up to count the bodies, this time there was only one, and you get that moment of realization when he sees the one that has been shot is actually a loved one, the closest one, the person he loves. And we see this white fading falling figure, and then this crumpled figure on the floor. And I love how it's this white silhouette where it's kind of like that white chalk outline of a dead body. It looks really powerful. And then we have on the next page the kind of full impact and just the word Sean. And I just found that really, really powerful. And in the novel in verse, you have a similar thing. So we have this poem here at the top. And again, this time there was only one. And then we get all of this like blank space here. And then just the word Sean right at the bottom in the corner. So I love how in the novel in verse, the tension is kind of created a lot by blank space on the page and just all of these pauses and how words are kind of segmented. and separated and kind of give you that hit of an impact. And then how the same is done in the graphic novel, but with a mixture of the word placement and the pictures. Sorry, just shuffling through my notes. So in the novel in verse, what was I also enjoyed when reading it was it's like almost like a collection of poems. So like each heading is the chapter. So we get, sorry. So we have like the sadness where he describes the grief that he feels about his brother going, and he kind of likens it to like someone pulling out one of your teeth, and then you have the pain, and then but you're also constantly kind of putting your tongue where you think there's a tooth and then there's nothing there. So we have the title here, the sadness, but it's also reads into part of the poem. The sadness is just so hard to explain, and that happens kind of throughout. So it's interesting to kind of see these as titles in here, whereas in the graphic novel, it's just kind of part of the story. Like nothing is kind of like highlighted by it. It just kind of flows into each other. And this this poem, the sadness, with the depiction of the loss being like having a tooth ripped out, that doesn't make an appearance in the graphic novel. So it was interesting to see what bits were kept in and what bits were kind of taken out to kind of make room for the art. So then it immediately goes into the next one. It's called It's So Hard to Say, and then that goes into talking about that Sean's dead. And then The Day Before Yesterday becomes a story explaining about how it happened, what they were doing, and then there were shots, and then after the shots was this little poem here, and then we have the Sean, and then we have this little one entitled I've Never Been in an Earthquake, and like that's his immediate kind of reaction to seeing his brother's body on the floor. And in this section here, it's like split right down the middle, like the whole poem is like split in half, which is again very, very powerful. About his whole world has just been like plummeted, cracked, broken, just like this poem. And what I really like is that how this is done in the graphic novel, in that we have this whole page, and each kind of line that was done in the novel in verse is like broken within. It looks like a ripped page. So we've got this whole like earthquake, like this crack that looks like it's cracked right in the ground, and then we've got this page split up, and then this image of this body falling, and it's done like it's done in the verse, where you've got the cracks between the words on the different lines. So I really like how that's kind of reflected in both of them. And in the novel in verse, obviously not being a graphic novel, it needs more words to kind of describe what's happening, to kind of to paint the pictures for us, to give us more things, to build up that atmosphere and tension. So we have the screaming that comes straight after the death. So he's making a list, and this is something that doesn't appear in the graphic novel, like the things that happen when someone is killed around here. He makes a list: number 1, screaming; number 2, sirens. Whereas in the graphic novel, it's just more played out in real time in kind of a linear fashion, like it's not broken up into points. And this part, screaming, very little of it appears in the graphic novel. So not everyone screams, usually just mums, girlfriends, daughters. In this case, it was Letitia, Sean's girlfriend, on her knees kissing his forehead between shrieks. I think she hoped her voice would somehow keep him alive, would clot the blood, but I think she knew, deep down in the deepest part of her downness, she was kissing him goodbye. And in the graphic novel, we just have this image here of utter despair of what's happening. I also really like how on this page, we know this is Will's mum because we saw a picture of her earlier when he was referring to his mum, so we can see she's running towards her child. And I like how we've got this big splodge of blood sort of in the middle separating the two, and the words Sean was shot appear in the blood. And then we have another really kind of harrowing picture, and it's just, I'm going to read it from the graphic novel first, and then I'll show you I'm going to read it from the novel in verse first, and then show you the image in the graphic novel. So the next poem is entitled "And My Mum." And my mum, moaning low, "Not my baby, not my baby, why?" Hanging over my brother's body like a dimmed lamppost. And then in the graphic novel we just get this picture again of utter devastation in her face, and she's cradling him like a baby. And the only words from that poem, "And my mum," come out as, in the speech bubbles, we have her saying, "Not my baby, not my baby, why?" So those are things that are very different. Like, a lot of the emotion that was pulled out in the novel in verse comes out in pictorial form in the graphic novel, which again makes sense because it's the graphic novel. And I like both of them. I love the art from the graphic novel, and I love the descriptive words from the novel in verse. Moving on. Sorry, I've got 5 pages of notes. I just want to make sure I say everything that I want to. I've said all that. Sorry, just talk amongst yourself. I'm just finishing this bit. Said all of that. Oh yeah, so there are other moments in the graphic novel that are missed. Sorry, I'm just having a drink of tea because my voice is going a bit. So in the novel in verse, there's some really lovely descriptions that I like of how it talks about both how like beef is passed down, like, you know, people's problems, people's issues with things are kind of passed down from one person to the next. But in the novel in verse, it kind of goes into that a bit more, that it was like it was coming for Sean. The description of Sean being put in a body bag, the description of how his mum, how Will and Sean's mum kind of copes once the body's been taken away and they have to go back home, and what she does. Like, all of that is kind of cut because we just have the images of Sean being put in the body bag, and we have the images of them returning home, and it chooses to kind of like focus on other things. So there are some bits of text that are missing from the graphic novel, but obviously in their place you get absolutely fantastic pictures. So from the book we had the whole poem about Sean being dead, and here we just have this bleak Sean's dead and the flats they live in, and then he goes to talk about the moon, that there was no moon that night, and that's accompanied by this like beautiful skyline drawing we have here with no moon in the sky. And on both of them I really like the images of Sean. So like I said, there are some images in the novel in verse, not Sean, Will. So we have these beautiful pictures of just his pain here, of just him dealing with the fact his brother's gone and he's just never going to see him again. And then in the novel in verse we still have this really lovely image. If I can find it, did I write it down? That would have been helpful. Page 33, I did write it down. Sensible. There. Just on his bed, just all these really like black and white sort of with like paint like images, and just the lines, you can just, I just feel from that picture how hard his face is just pushed into that pillow just to kind of like muffle out his grief. And again we get this image of what their bedroom is like and how it kind of like shows their different personalities, and this kind of realization from Will that he's never going to see his brother in this room again, and this is kind of the room where they'd talk, they'd share things. You know, they must just be so close from sharing this room together, and to sleep somewhere knowing that no one else is going to be coming back into it just must be absolutely devastating. So there are lots of poems about describing the room and the conversations they used to have. And another thing that isn't really taken in the graphic novel One thing that's not shown that much in the graphic novel is Will really likes anagrams. So when you rearrange the letters, and he's got things like canoe and ocean, and enjoys that, you know, you could do a canoe on the ocean, like they kind of link different things. And these kind of come up throughout the book in the novel in verse. There's like just one page where it'll be like anagram 2, and then it'll be like feel, flee. Whereas the graphic novel doesn't make any kind of reference to that, apart from this one, where again we just from all of the descriptions about their bedroom, all we have in here is just this one image, which but highlights it perfectly. You can immediately see that Sean liked these artists on the wall, that he has posters of, that he likes his room neat, he's got a place for everything, it's really tidy, and Will's side of the room is an absolute mess. And then on the wall you can see he's written some of his anagrams. So he's got scare and cares, canoe and ocean, and feel and flee. So all those are written there next to his bed. So I enjoyed that was still in there, even if they kind of didn't go sort of like much further into it. So one thing that I thought was better depicted in the graphic novel was when Will starts looking at who he thinks killed his brother. He thinks it's this guy named Riggs because he is part of a gang. They used to know him. He's part of a gang called the Dark Sons. And they explain about turf. And all of this is this double spread of this map where you've got all the different blocks, and you've got this, here's their building, you've got different kind of things around, and then we've got this very clearly labelled, this is Dark Sons territory, and then we've got these arrows pointing to the corner shop which sells their mum's eczema cream. And I love how through those pictures it shows how this is such in the shop is just like only just so slightly into their territory, and it's just how it meant so much to the family. Like the mum being able to have this cream meant that she is not clawing her skin, which must be very upsetting for everyone to kind of see and for her to deal with, because it's just so itchy. So it's very important for them to be able to get hold of this cream, and it's just such a small bit into the territory of this other gang, and just how this tiny little grudge has just done something that then just these people then have this absolutely devastating loss just from someone having this tiny grudge over territory. I also missed when I was reading it the first time, there is a page in the novel in verse where each word is on a separate line, and it says that you need to get down with somebody or get beat down by somebody. And in here it's got each word on this compass point. I missed that the first time around. But yeah, the description of the turf I thought was so much better for having the image with it. But in the novel in verse, I felt that this part with the elevator was done much better. I didn't write the page number down because I'm stupid. Let's pause while I find the page. Found it. So in the graphic novel, I do love, like, he's getting into the lift, and we have just this image in here. We can see his face reflected in the shiny panel of buttons, and it's got that kind of like grim determination, kind of haunted look, which is fabulous. But I think the novel in verse kind of conveys the tension a bit better, because we have, I just like the way that it uses the words. I'm going to show you here. So we've got the chapter at the elevator, which I'll read, and then now, as you can see, there's down is written in an arrow form pointing down, which is very clever. At the elevator, back already sore, uncomfortable, gun strapped like a brick, rubbing my skin raw with each step. Seems like time stood still, and I reached out and pushed the button. White light surrounded the black arrow. Down, 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 down. And that description of how he's got the gun and it makes him really uncomfortable, and like the physical pain he has from it being there, from its presence. I like how that's described, and kind of the tension as he kind of brings himself to push the button. So you get all of that kind of like reluctant and that kind of the grim-faced darkness, and just reading the downs and seeing the downs in that arrow form, it kind of just makes my heart kind of plummet into my stomach, because I am scared for Will and the deed and the consequences of doing this and what that's going to do to his mind and his heart. So I just found the novel in verse particularly more powerful at this point, so it kind of felt better. So the lift numbers are very present. So here we have number 7, which is where we start, and it's just that lift button, that single button on a whole blank page. And as we go down, we then get 6, 5, and it changes position on the page. But so it's just the one button that we see each time as the lift goes to different floors. In the graphic novel, we have a full page picture of the lift buttons. So we get all of the buttons at the bottom, we get the sign no smoking, the capacity, and then we get this arrow pointing down and the numbers. And although I really like that, and you get that before every single floor and each new person getting on, I do find it more powerful in the novel in verse because of that blankness. And I just love the kind of the lowering of the number and it just being that one number hovering. It feels more tense in the novel in verse. Okay, so there was one time that I noticed more that the graphic novel changed the layout slightly from the novel in verse. So usually the graphic novel up until this point had done a very good job of kind of keeping all those separated sentences together in little chunks. And it is on this page here. So in the novel in verse, we get this whole kind of moment where Sean encounters the first person in the lift, who is kind of like his brother's mentor, kind of like his brother's kind of like adopted older brother, kind of someone who looked out for him, taught him the rules, and kept an eye out for him. But Will knows he's dead. So this is his first kind of like ghostly encounter in the elevator. So he's freaking out, and we get this fabulous kind of image here of him rubbing his eyes with the kind of extra lines of where his hands have been kind of moments before. And we've got the lines all separated as he rubbed his eyes over and over and over and over, just like it kind of does in the graphic novel. But here's the first change, that we get we get 2 lines here, whereas in the graphic novel there are 3. And that is that he kind of thought that he's never smoked weed, basically. He's never been high. He's not experienced what it's like to feel high or what it's like to have like a bad trip, which would kind of be his only explanation for seeing a ghost. So we've got don't know high life, don't know bad trips, don't know no dead man. And in the novel in verse, all those 3 of those don't are in one paragraph. And then we have a line space, and then it's supposed to be talking to me though. Whereas in here, we have 2 don'ts, don't know high life, don't know bad trips. And then we have, in this one image of him sort of like freaking out, clutching his face, we have it all kind of smushed together. Don't know no dead man, supposed to be talking to me though. And that's, the sentence is all there as a whole rather than broken up like it is in the novel in verse. And then in the novel in verse, we then get this whole brand new page. And then we have the start of the new kind of like poem chapter called Yeah, I Did. And here we've got him in a completely separate picture shouting, yeah, I did. Like he knew. Buck just said to Will, you thought I was dead. And then Will's had his little freak out, and then he says back to him, yeah, I did. I did think you were dead. So I just found that interesting. I like in how the novel in verse, you have the 3 don'ts in a line. But I can see why, because the graphic novel has chosen a more linear story, it's kept the sentence together in that fashion. I just thought that was interesting. And I think I've already mentioned that earlier on. Yeah, so the speech has more, it's more kind of directed to the punctuation, which means that the flow and the beat that was in the novel in verse feels slightly different than in the graphic novel. I've already kind of spoken on that a much. There is kind of another one on, like, if you wanted to ever look yourself on page 99, the way that's done, there's lots of kind of like T's at the beginning, and it just feels a lot snappier with like the flow and the beat, whereas that's kind of all written in sentences, so you haven't got that so much in the graphic novel. But I've already waffled on about that quite a lot, and I've still got other things to say, so I'm going to move on and not go into it too much, or I'm literally just going to be going through the whole books with you step by step. Okay, again, I'm just going to have to find these points in the books for this next point. So again, in the novel in verse, we're still having this conversation between Buck and Will. And in the novel in verse, the pauses and the line spaces feel very important with how it's read. And we get some really lovely images of the kind of tones the characters are using with each other, and their kind of facial expressions, like eyes turning to razor blades. It just gives you a fabulous image of what Will was feeling. But what I really love in the graphic novel is this image when Buck is kind of confronting Will with, like, well, what are you going to do about it? We have this wonderful, again, this white silhouette against this like painted like blurry black watercolor, with this arm holding the gun and follow the rules. And I just found that image really, really powerful. Oh yeah, so we have another point sort of later on in both the books where the graphic novel does kind of follow again at the spaced out speech pattern with a conversation between Will and another ghost, this time Danny, and again her questioning what he's doing. And in the novel in verse, and this is where I found the graphic novel more powerful. So the novel in verse, we've got this back and forth conversation, which is very much mirrored with the speech bubbles in the graphic novel. But what I really like about the graphic novel is when you've got this impact of Will saying it doesn't matter, you've got this immediate, very clear emotional image of Danny, and then Will's reaction to her reaction just in that one picture, which is fabulous. And the novel in verse doesn't quite give that same emotional impact that the graphic novel does in that instance. Oh yeah, so another few images that I really loved in the graphic novel. There's a fabulous hug between him and his pop when he first comes in. Let's look at I love drawings of hugs. Just look at the warmth in those hugs. The proper squeeze going on, and just faces, just that moment of bliss of just hugging someone. And I love in the graphic novel like this feelings of Will is really just starting to crack up under all of the weight that he's carrying, and we have this wonderful image of that black silhouette of him with this like massive like phone crack, glass shattering over the top, and all these things that he wants to share with his dad, to tell him about like all these burdens that he's carrying. And I love how we've got all that written in this white space between him and his dad, and then the rest of it comes out and it's all like cracks and things coming out. I just thought that was really, really powerful as well. And also just these, we get this same feeling when his father is telling his story. We just have these wonderful images, and again I really love how the graphic novel did it with this is what happens after his pop has returned from a shooting. We see him running, we see like the quiet, dark family home, and interspersed is just sort of like images of the skyline, of him just taking off his clothes and him just curling up in on himself in a little ball, like just going into the fetal position. And then on the next double page we have that same image again, but kind of more blurred out, as though he's kind of like fading out. And then we see kind of that clear image of him just curled up in the bathtub. And again, really powerful. And in both the graphic novel and in the novel in verse, we have this same feeling of his father explaining why he's got this, why he felt how he did at the end of it. And with the novel in verse, we've got the description of how his dad looked, and then we have another blank space, and then we have the words. And in here we have this same tension, but it's done through characters looking at each other. So we've got his dad and his uncle, and Will all kind of sharing glances as if to say what, and then it's his dad. We've got this really big picture, downcast eyes, this kind of guilt and grief look, and then we've got the same few words at the bottom explaining the reasons behind all of that guilt and grief. And again, I feel like just the spacing of it just gives the impact to those moments. So overall, I love both versions of the story. I love the graphic novel, I love the novel in verse. I think they give different things at different moments, but overall they give the heart and message of the same story. And I love both versions. And I now have to give these back to the library, and these are both on my wish list. I want to own them. I think they're fantastic. And if you have not read them, you absolutely should. Definitely. If you've read one and not the other, go get the other one. Read that one too. It's marvellous. Thank you so much for watching. Please do chat to me down below if you enjoyed this, if you've read the books. It would be really lovely to hear from you. You know, I love a chat. And happy reading, everyone.